Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Evaluating How You Run Your Large Capture Operation. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Thomas Lamont from AIIM and Greg Council from Periscript. And Periscript is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. As we get started, just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. And across the bottom of your screen is a list of all the widgets available to you. And I do want to point out that we do have group chat, and that is in the list of widgets across the bottom of your screen. So just click on that and it'll open up, and you'll be able to chat text message-wise with each other and also with us here at AIIM during this event. Just because this is an open text message box for us, everyone will be able to see and communicate with each other. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout the hour using the Q&A feature, and that's to the left side of the screen area. We will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But you can also use this feature to ask for technical assistance. You may download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list. And there are also a few other documents and links in there to help you learn more about today's topic. So just click in there in the resources area at any time, and that link will open a new browser tab so you can read that or save the document off for later viewing. At the end of the webinar, a brief survey is going to open up in your browser, and I'd appreciate it if you'd take a few moments to offer your feedback and suggest other topics for us to cover. You can also access this survey in the list of widgets, and it's open at the bottom of your screen right now. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. And I want to start things off right now by asking a couple of poll questions to you all. And so if you come over to your keyboards, I just would like for you to answer this question for us as we get started. And because Thomas Lamont and I have been having some conversations about running the capture operations, and we just wanted to get this quick pulse point before we start our talk today. So how many different capture systems, separate vendors, do you have in your organization? That you have none at all? You have one capture system, 2, 3 capture systems, or 4 or more? So you just go ahead and submit your answer there, and I'm going to share out with everyone in the audience just where we all stand here. And it looks like everybody who's participating on the call today has kind of across the board, well, 46%, nearly half have just one capture system, but there's a number of you that have multiple systems, 23% having 4 or more. So that's not surprising results to see that. So just wanted to share that out with each other here. And now for the next poll question. What percentage of all your organization's document processing is automated? Things like document IDs, data extraction, things like that. What is currently in your processes automated today? Nothing at all, 25% or less, 50% or less, 75% or less, or over 75%? Which quartile of your processes are automated today? And again, and just give your best guesstimate on that if you're not exactly sure. So I'm also going to share these results out with everyone here. And I'm actually going to invite Thomas Lamont. Actually, before I do, let me just take a quick look at here. 5% of our respondents here today are saying that none of your processes are automated. For a large capture or for a large organization, that's something to be concerned about. I'm glad you're here to be listening with us today. And there's also a number of organizations having very few processes, what I would consider few processes in place, less than half. So that's a very high percentage here, 80%, 85% having 50 or less. And so that's, I'm glad you're here joining us and listening to us today. So right now I want to introduce our panelists of speakers that we have with us. Thomas Lamont is an AIM market intelligence analyst, and he's well-versed and credentialed in the field of ECM, ERM, and BPM, with a heightened focus on solving the operational problems of businesses today. Globally recognized as an industry thought leader, Thomas's opinions and views are highly sought after by business organizations of all sizes, from both the consumer and the supplier communities. Thomas recently delivered the opening keynote address for the AIM virtual event on GDPR. And we also have with us today Greg Council, who is Vice President of Marketing and Product Management at Periscript. And Greg specializes in revitalizing existing products and bringing new products to market in the document capture, enterprise content management, and business process management markets. He has over 15 years of experience in requirements gathering, product planning, competitive market analysis, and channel engagement for both on-prem and SaaS solution softwares. So these are two industry thought leaders who are key to share with you quite a bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to turn things over to Thomas Lamont to begin his part of the talk today. Thomas?
Thank you, Teresa, for that excellent introduction. I also want to extend another thank you to everyone attending our webinar today and participating in those initial surveys. Those will be a great frame of reference for the discussions that we'll be having throughout this hour. And so with that said, we have a very exciting program for you today. I will be our opening act on document capture, and I'm going to tell you exactly why modern document capture solutions and capabilities are worthy a second look in your organization, as well as talk about some traditional challenges of capture deployment. And later on, I'll be passing things off to Greg Council from Periscript, who will be dissecting some very interesting data from a recent survey about real-life document capture leaders, and he'll present to us by the numbers how these capture operators are dealing with capture today and directions we can take to learn and improve from their experience and apply them to our organization. So while preparing for this presentation today, I started thinking about document capture and image solutions over the years, and I was confronted with this wave of nostalgia. Like many of you, I have my own storied history with capture solutions. My story goes back to the 1980s, but perhaps not how you expect. At that time, I wasn't paid a salary. I didn't commute to an office. I was a young kid growing up in Rochester, New York. And even if you couldn't place Rochester on a map, perhaps you've heard of one of our hometown heroes, George Eastman, the founder of George Eastman Kodak. And among George Eastman's many accolades, he is considered to be the father of imaging and document capture as we know it today. And as a kid growing up in Rochester, George Eastman's legacy was strongly felt. He was a dinner table fixture. My grandfather, he repaired capture and image systems professionally. My mom sold them, my father inspected them, and my grandmother processed the invoices. You know, like many Rochesterians, capture in a way was a family business. But as a kid, my experience was a bit different. And in my field of view, capture was at once this extremely important force propelling my family's livelihood, but also this out-of-sight anonymous machinery that accomplished something I knew was very important, but also sat firmly in the peripheral. And now I tell you this story because I see parallels in my childhood recollections of capture as this crucial but tucked away functionality with the way organizations today also keep document capture in the peripheral of their attention and fail to invest in properly positioned capture as an organizational focus and strategic priority to lead their business transformation initiatives. Many organizations still view document capture as simple scanning, and this is a huge missed opportunity. Capture is not just a blunt instrument. It's the entry point to the digital office and more efficient ways of working. And now today, emerging intelligent capture solutions are coming. They are supremely integrated, automated, and primed to evolve with dynamic and changing information challenges in businesses today. And as an organization, if you are not quick to reap the competitive advantages intelligent capture provides, another competitor will be there to beat you to it. So we need to move past our old understanding of what constitutes document capture and look to the future. And the people we rely on, of course, are the leaders of capture systems, the managers, the overseers. And these people need to be responsible for positioning document capture to meet the next generation of information challenges, not only as a source of immediate competitive advantage, but also as a long-term competency. And this requires a combination of people, process, and technology. So why should intelligent capture be capturing your attention? Fundamentally, capture is about that crucial alchemy to turn documents into data and bring essential knowledge and information that fuels enterprise processes, operations, and individuals into the fold. And here are some immediate gains. So document capture solutions help us win the war with paper. Modern capture solutions are the front line to digital business. They defend us from paper and ensure the quickest and cleanest possible conversion to digital content. At the same time, information is exploding, wildly sprawling throughout our repositories. Documents are everywhere. By positioning capture solutions at the start of the information lifecycle, as soon as data hits the open air of the office, intelligent document capture helps safeguard our content and lessen security risk and regulatory noncompliance. At the same time, intelligent document capture solutions also uphold accurate and reliable data integrity, which organizations need to surface data accurately, wholly intact, and verified, and to avoid errors, rework, and improve the ability to find documents and content that we are looking for. And finally, intelligent document capture systems help eliminate manual tasks, increase efficiency, and lower costs by automating key workflows. So when we look at document capture drivers from the AIIM community respondents, we surveyed a group of them in a recent AIIM Industry Watch report, Paper Free, Are We There Yet? And we find that 51% feel that improved searchability and shareability is a top driver, followed by improved process productivity for document capture systems. In addition, anytime, anywhere content access is a top driver for 32%, security and compliance 26%. And so capture benefits from these results, you can tell, are well documented. Capture solutions are also a long-term investment. Technology is always innovating, and we need to do our best to keep up with changing technology. And what this calls for is greater integration between capture with core systems for increased visibility and control over data captured from the outset. And to do this, we need document capture solutions that go beyond OCR. And we need to learn the language of ones and zeros to prepare for the robots and how they will disrupt our industries. The best document capture solutions build on a strong OCR base and then leverage machine learning and other technologies to provide a solution that can satisfy business users' needs. Now let's look at what problems are typically faced with capture systems today. And here are 4 things our capture systems need to do more to deal with. First, multiple document types. Second, ensuring data quality and accuracy. The third thing is poor usability. And the fourth, the increasing complexity of our modern capture demands that now go well beyond simple imaging and OCR. So what do we do when the sheer volume of document types is so hard to manage, when there's never only one flavor of document types? Could you imagine if there was only one, just a Word document, right? And we could go from there. But OCR software is inadequate for businesses that want to use extracted data to efficiently process transactions, organize their documents for better data governance, and search for important documents quickly and easily to basically make informed business decisions. OCR software supplies text and numbers devoid of context, which is good for full text search, but not good enough for much else. So we really need capture solutions that keep context core to its functionality. And truly, it's not about search. It's about truly finding what we're looking for. Another problem is when good data goes bad. Data doesn't have a best by date, so what can we do? We need to be able to verify and defend data accuracy and quality. Can you? It's truly easier said than done, but it's very, very important. You know, bad or off data causes many problems, inefficiencies, and costly errors. So for our future document capture technology buys, we need to ensure that data quality is a strategic priority. And again, context is the heart of this. Another problem that traditional capture runs into is when usability is an afterthought and not meeting our needs. And professionals need a product that works, something that isn't a barrier or an idle of frustration that we are forced to deal with every day. We need solutions that are comprehensive to deal with everything you can throw at it, from structured to unstructured content in paper and digital documents. Configurable, deep enough for those capture experts among us, but also simple for out-of-the-box results and fast uptime for implementation. And we need something that scales with business change. And this includes providing mobile device options for remote workers so that they still have access to capture functionality on the road, which is becoming increasingly important. And finally, the most difficult problem of all, a trapped mindset and resistance to change. Many organizations are slowed down by leadership that is trapped in the 1980s, thinking about document capture as scanning only, and not as this crucial vehicle to help us navigate the evolution of documents and technology. We need to be tolerant of change so that we can ready for emerging new tech, such as machine learning and robotics. And the goal is to simplify, standardize, and automate with our document capture systems to transform our departments and business operations. So now let's take a quick look at what organizations say their top priorities for improving their document capture systems are. And we find that 56% are prioritizing automating more manual processes with document classification. 30% are focused on updating capture systems with better technology and infrastructure. 22% are improving security and compliance. And another 22% are increasing speed of delivery. And 21% are consolidating multiple systems. So again, this kind of harkens back to that initial poll question that Teresa hosted, in that there are groups of people with multiple document capture systems. And the goal would be to consolidate and have a centralized solution. And there's many different strategies and ways to go about that. So to conclude this part of the presentation, if you don't know where the next step is, what can you do, right? And here are a few recommendations just to hopefully get your document capture goals and ambitions started. So you should begin by assessing your current capture system, strategy, and partners. You want to position the system right at the door to defend from paper and ensure the quickest wins and cleanest conversion to digital. At the same time, we should not settle for subpar accuracy and data quality of capture systems. We should verify actual accuracy versus what is stated. And again, this kind of calls back to that survey question about how automated your organization is. Many times people believe their organization is a certain level of automation, but can you prove that? And is it really doing what you think it is? And this is something I'm sure Greg will talk a little bit more about in his presentation as well. And the final thing is to ensure that existing paper-free processes are taking advantage of data capture and integration with core enterprise systems. Also consider alternative product models such as the cloud that best serve your unique business requirements. And remember, again, if you're not sure where to turn, seek out trusted advisors in the supplier community or professional associations like AIIM. At the same time, define leadership and stakeholder participation is vital. And pursue quick wins and realistic goals. It is a process. Like Rome, capture systems are not erected in a day, so it does take time, and it takes stakeholder support and senior management support as well. So with that, thank you for your attention. This wraps up my portion of the presentation. I will soon be throwing the ball over to Greg for some survey analysis and some other thought leadership. But just before that, I please invite you to return to your keyboards for another poll question, which I will go ahead and read the answer set to you now. And this question is asking, how do you validate your capture data? And the answer choices: we don't use any data validation process. We use confidence scores to determine what needs to be reviewed by staff. We manually review questionable data from the system. We manually review all data or other. Please, at this time, enter in group chat how else you would approach validation. Okay, I'll give a moment. Excellent, thank you. So yeah, we're seeing some very interesting results here. And Greg, looking at these results, big picture, do they surprise you? Are they what you expected? What's your take on document capture solutions today? Greg?
Yeah, so I don't, looking at this, none of this actually surprises me. Maybe the percentage of folks out there answering that they use confidence scores is probably just a few points higher than what we typically encounter. But the big one, the purple line, is that we manually review questionable data from the system. That one, it was actually kind of a trick question in that the real pivot point here is, how do you know when data is questionable in the system? And that's probably the biggest challenge that clients that we have face. How they face it is efficiently determining what is questionable versus what can be considered high quality. So, and we've got some interesting data here that we're going to go through that I'll go ahead and take you, unless you wanted to comment on that as well.
Yeah, Greg. No, I feel similarly. I think it really is about how having those systems to those metrics to say what is questionable. The same way with what we're talking about in the last survey, the initial survey polls about automation. We need a way to prove that and defend it, right? And yeah, I'd be interested in knowing more about that.
Yeah, so, and there are a lot of ways to do that type of determination. It tends to get a little bit more complex in integration. But let me go ahead and give you the overview of the research that we had. So you'll notice in my bio it was heavily geared to more of requirements gathering and kind of the solutioneering approach. That's really where kind of my center of gravity lies, is really just trying to understand the nature of problems and then trying to solve them in the most efficient ways. So I have a lot of curiosity around here. So these surveys help us to not only plan, but to better understand what situations our clients face and in general, so that we can work to solve them. So the objective was kind of threefold. One is understanding the different approaches to achieving data quality, which is really the ultimate goal, getting high quality data out of the system. But the other supporting goals are the comprehensiveness of that data, and of course, how efficiently or how well you can get to it at a low cost. In terms of the industries, we basically canvassed, and we wanted to include everyone. And the audience was the real big one. We wanted to focus on those roles that had an active that were actively involved with configuring the systems and ongoing maintenance and management, so that we were getting answers from the people that I think know the best. In terms of the demographics, you can see here we had a pretty good representation both on company size as well as the locations of where these companies were. Of course, it's always going to gear a little bit more to the U.S., but there was a good amount of participation from Western Europe and whatnot. In terms of the company sizes, it's really important to understand and be able to slice and dice this data by the company size, because we all know that with greater the size, you may have more capital that you can work with, but also the organization becomes a lot more complex. Vice versa, for smaller companies, you're more efficient or adaptive, but you may not have the same type of budget and wherewithal. All right, so let's walk into the first one. I happen to be a huge proponent of reducing complexity. There's a reason why the word simplification exists and complexification does not, because we all desire to have simpler, more streamlined processes and lives in general. So this was quite revealing, but not surprising, unfortunately, because I think that most of the time the way we solution providers tend to think is in features and functionality, and I think thereby a lot of companies and organizations that look to buy these solutions also think that way too, because it's an easy proxy. But what often is overlooked is how easy is the system to configure and deploy and manage. We've heard the horrible statistics when it comes to typically the percentage of IT projects that are a success and ones which are failures. And one of those culprits is the complexity and the project scope where technology is involved. So what's surprising is after more than 2 decades of potential maturity of these solutions, we really haven't improved the situation when it comes to simplifying the approach. Certainly a lot of solutions are available now where they're in the cloud, so that certainly obviates the need to install software and do that type of thing, but the configuration is always still part of it. Now, if you look at it, 38% think their solutions are very difficult to configure. That's not necessarily the function of the software itself, but it can also mean the scope of the project that they're dealing with or the document types. But I would tend to say that it's really a poor showing overall that only about 20% of respondents even use the word easy in here. So what we want to do on a takeaway, for each one of these slides I want to offer just something to think about, is that when you're looking at your current systems, in addition to consolidation, which is always a way to reduce complexity, is to start thinking of it not only in terms of the performance you get after the software is configured, but what are the investments required to initially configure the software? What are the investments required to expand capabilities or document types? And then on the other side of it is to measure and maintain that system. Again, a lot of this stuff is often kicked down the road. You kick the can down the road because we're focused on the technology acquisition and the promises of automation. But there's a lot of work and investment to get there. Okay, so next we wanted to delve into the different types of documents processed. And this leads into the complexity piece of it. So I didn't want to pin all the blame on software or solution vendors. Certainly complexity of the software is a culprit, but the scope of it can affect complexity as well. And here we see a pretty large amount of respondents that are managing quite a number of different documents. Now what we don't have in terms of the answers here is how many of those documents are involved in one single business process. Now, for instance, loan origination can involve well over 20 and even 50 documents. In some cases, when we're talking about loan documentation, it can actually be more than 100 documents. That would skew the results. But there were quite a few respondents that are dealing with multiple document types, different types of information. It can be standardized in terms of structured forms, or it might be more variable in terms of if it's an AP process or whatnot, where the difficulty is in a more general approach to be able to find this information. So achieving consistency and accuracy with document-based workflows becomes a more complex affair. The more documents that are involved, the more complex your situation is, requiring different rules, validation workflows, third-party databases to help automate validation, and all those kinds of things certainly drive complexity. The one big thing here is when you're looking at application of these technologies to a particular range of documents is to understand, and I'm sure a lot of you on this webinar understand this, is are the document types really driven by a process like what I aforementioned, the loan origination type of thing, or are they driven by channel? So channels being the method of input, whether it's fax or email or FTP or cloud or whatnot. Channels can typically create what I call artificial barriers and segmentation of documents when you could consolidate them by looking across channels, identifying the various documents, and then dealing with them in the same way. So you're kind of getting a more unified approach. Okay, so keeping on this document type frame is we want to understand the increasing likelihood or the increasing incorporation of documents that are born digital into document processing workflows. So while images still account for a larger percentage of file types processed, and when we talk about images, we do talk about the standard TIFFs, sometimes JPEGs, certainly more increasingly we see rasterized or image-based PDFs. But digital files continue to gain for obvious reason because they're easier to create more and more. If you go back and look, and you might even try this in your own systems, look at if you process PDFs, what you might assume to be image-only PDFs might actually be born digital. They may have started as Word documents and get saved as PDFs where you have all the fidelity of that text in there, but yet you're having to do some additional configurations. But taking a deeper look into the nature of the documents from a file type perspective is certainly something that you want to consider because a lot of these technologies are starting to take or have moved to become a more agnostic type of solution set so that it doesn't matter if it's an image or if it's an electronic document, or even the nature of the document. Let's say it's a text-rich document versus more of a spreadsheet. The ability to process it, parse out, locate data, and then extract it effectively can be handled within the same workflow. Now, this was an interesting one. It's one that it's probably an ugly truth within especially the document capture industry, especially as we start to encounter more digitally born documents or digitally native documents, is the nature in which you have to handle them. So I wasn't really surprised, but it's always an interesting validation that the kinds of hoops we jump through to be able to process both types of documents, those being images and those being digital documents, entails different types of workflows, all the way to different software entirely to be able to accommodate them. Again, this can be a factor of not handling documents consistent within a certain business workflow due to different channels that you encounter, but it can also be just limitations in the software in general. It was interesting that 22% answered that their platform can accommodate both image-based and digital documents, but the remainder have to do something different. So you can handle those documents, and that's a good thing. That's certainly where we want to progress, is to move that 22% to the vast majority, where you can handle them natively and deal with them within the same workflows. But we still have to deal with things like some solutions will actually turn a perfectly good digital file into an image and introduce potential error in terms of OCR. So one of the things, again, that we like to do is not just look at documents by type in terms of document classes, but also where these documents come from and in what formats do they originally appear, so that in cases where they're digital documents to begin with, you can identify workflows and treat them in the same way. Okay, next comes accuracy. Now, not all the questions of the survey are posted here, but everybody is interested in accuracy. In fact, from a general, if I can recollect, I think greater than 90% would put accuracy as their most important factor in terms of automation, apart from getting the efficiencies that you gain through automation. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that concepts such as out-of-the-box accuracy for data is highly desirable, as it reduces the level of effort, things like potentially and continually maintaining that type of performance over the long run. And we all know that that's a challenging thing that we face. So taking stock of system performance is often hard enough, but tuning that system to achieve given performance and also maintaining it is a very complex and risky task. Further, depending upon the value of the data, an organization's tolerance for error, you might have a variance based on different document types or actually the data on a document. So while financial-related documents, the objective might be overall to get 99% accuracy, you may have a half a percent error or 99.5% accuracy requirements for specific data on that same document. So again, it's a complexity that's driven by the requirements of the project, but the solution should be able to support whatever you need. Now, the second data point the second half of this slide points to potential misunderstanding. So I want to make this clear on how data accuracy should be measured. Understanding accuracy involves statistical sampling, as you're measuring an entire production workflow. Certainly, you would, if you have available third-party data and it's comprehensive enough, measuring data or the answers from a system, from an automated system, against this third-party data could be sufficient, provided you have a successful enough or a high enough percentage of matching data to essentially ensure that data being compared to is actually the right data to compare it to. But all of this points to things where the approach is all over the map. So we have clients that manually review every single bit of data, which is probably the most costly thing to do. apart from not measuring at all, which in that case you don't even know what data accuracy you're getting, to more complex implementations where they're doing things like statistical modeling using confidence scores of the answers so that they can do effectively branching. So part of the data goes straight through while other part of the data needs additional validation either through third-party databases or your own internal systems of record or by human intervention. This was also an interesting one. So we've established importance of data quality and how they achieve it. But again, it's kind of dispersed in terms of who really owns the data quality problem. Now, the balance, I think, was split between the operations area, which I think is generally a good thing, but you're not the consumers of the data, and then the department managers that use the data, but you're not necessarily in a position to monitor the data quality, or if you are, you're bearing the full burden of it. In our experience, when operations owns data quality, it might not be a priority. So what that means is the actual precise measurement goes by the wayside in favor of something more economical. Now that's certainly not always the case, but we do encounter that type of mentality where they think they're doing a very good job or an adequate job, but really the focus is on delivering these types of shared services in the most efficient way possible. So sometimes that can be missing. Certainly the oversight of being able to continuously test accuracy of the data coming out of the system can become somewhat of a chore, and therefore it gets overlooked by the daily fires that we all have to put out. So I wanted to just summarize and talk about some things. Even though within each slide I tried to offer some takeaways and things, is what are some of the ways that you can look at your current systems and then start to tackle optimization or even branch out and become more efficient by extending existing investment into other document types and things like that. The first, I think it was the first survey where it was how many different types of capture vendors or systems do you have in your organization, where there were quite a few percentages that had more than one system. Most of this probably comes as the result of document capture being more of a departmental purchase, where it might have been, let's say, the accounts payable department or the finance department purchasing something like a processing solution for invoices, where instead of something where it's more of an enterprise platform. That leads to a lot of problems in terms of fragmentation of not only business processes, but just continuous investment in a myriad of different technologies, where something that's more consolidated and where you look at things in a broader sense can yield a lot of benefit. So we all know that they've been around a long time, these solutions, they've evolved, and so it never hurts to take a good look at what your current technologies are, if it makes sense to upgrade within your vendor solution set to take advantage of some of the new capabilities out there. So it's really hard, just like any kind of technology, to keep in touch with it. But this means we also need to manage more and more document types as documents continuously come into, and the organizations depend more and more on them. When it comes to variation of document types, document classification, and more specifically automated classification enters the fray. So one of the things earlier on is you handle a lot of different documents, but they may be handled in different types of solutions. Or it's really hard for an organization to encounter and organize documents that go in and out of the organization. One of the solutions that is increasingly becoming popular is application of some sort of automated classification where it can do content analysis or visual analysis, or at a very minimal level look at the file type so that you can judge and branch and figure out which is the best way to go. For the file formats, multiple channels of document input is often a cause of variance across document type. So increasingly there are systems that are agnostic, as I mentioned, to the file type, but in a way that does not require introducing error. If you can convert digital documents into an image, you're introducing error anywhere between 1% and 5%, and nobody wants that. So potentially it puts more of a demand on the complexity of the system that you have. So systems should be able to treat these documents natively. And good thing that 22% of the respondents are able to do that. You should go back and look and ask if your system is also capable of doing that as well, because it does improve data accuracy. And lastly, on that accuracy front, if you don't have a solution that is pre-tuned to meet certain field level accuracy, or if you don't have the additional systems of record to be able to perform that additional validation, probably the most efficient way to go is doing a baseline comparison of what's being manually reviewed versus what is coming out of the system in a raw state, so that you can identify what the deltas are, often at a field level, to establish that baseline. From there, you can focus on the ones that are the most egregious in terms of inaccurate data, and then start applying rules and looking for those types of systems or third-party data that you can use to augment and basically shore up the output of the answers of those systems. So there are a number of different things. While we have the answers of the survey, we're going to be producing earlier next year some best practices on how to tackle these things. So it's really not about identifying the problems. It's trying to work within a framework to address the problems in the most efficient way as possible. This is our obligatory marketing slide. So I do have marketing in my title, although I'm more of a product guy. On the Periscript front is, we do a really good job at aligning and establishing the ability to do one single workflow regardless of document types. And so we do that through automated classification and a broad range of support for different types of data. And we do focus on the simplicity. So the faster you can get something into production, the sooner you can reap the benefits. So everything that we do is really focused around simplicity. And with that, that concludes the portion of the survey presentation, everything like that. The full research discussed today, we will provide as an ebook, and you can go here to grab it. And I highly recommend you go through that. And if you have any questions, we can certainly take them now, I think.
Yes, and actually I want to thank you. I've been listening to Greg Counsell from Periscript, and before that, Thomas Lamont from AIIM. And this research, there's a link to it in the resources box on your screens right now. So if you go ahead and click this link, and it's going to open up in a new browser tab, and you can finish downloading the document after we're done with our webinar today. And so it's very helpful statistical information to help you benchmark your organization against this. It's just a way to see where you are and find ways to help you understand where you can improve and just get better in making these efforts. And also in the resources box, there is a tip sheet from AIIM in there about capture operations in there. So that's also another really good resource that we have for you, available to you too. So I encourage you to go ahead and download those. And so thank you. And I just want to get to a couple of the questions. We have a few questions that have come in here today. And just want to start with, because I think we must have sparked some interest because of our little pulse point survey question that we asked the audience members. Someone was asking, because they have so many different systems in their organization, how do you deal with those multiple capture systems by the different vendors that are placed throughout their organization? Does that lead to content silos? What if each system isn't following the same process flows but should be following the same or more similar process flows? Greg, I wanted to start with you with your thoughts on how to manage that and deal with that. Greg, if you want to check your mute button on that.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about how best to answer that question, because it's an easy question to ask, but quite a long answer that you can supply. Thomas, why don't you take that first and give me some time to think about that?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Greg. I'll jump in and then I'll punt it back to you. Well, I guess, definitely it's data silos is a huge problem. Going back to Greg's term, which I love, is that there is no complexification, right? We want simple. And so dealing with, I think people are right in identifying that is a problem. Multiple capture systems are going to cause inefficiencies. And of course, it'd be better to be on a centralized technology landscape, right? but of course, the reality of that being the case is, again, it's easier said than done. There's some voices that suggest that, having everything centralized would be a dream state, and we can't really get there. So there are, steps that some capture solutions are taking, I know, involving metadata or things like that to kind of circumvent the need for a single source or centralized repository in that case. But as far as the technical, as Greg said, it's a very complex thing, and it would be unique to each solution. So I hope, Greg, that I stall long enough to, to spark some. You want to jump back in?
So probably one of so I think that it's one of those desires that, for a lot of reasons, is not going to be very practical to completely reduce the amount of repositories to one, or to be able to put a chokehold. I mean, ultimately, that's what I think it would do, is put a chokehold on enterprise information if you're trying to control it all at the point of access. But one of the approaches that I have seen work pretty well is the use of agents. Agents being these types of little applications that sit on various points of where information tends to come in and out of an organization that can do a first pass evaluation of what type of information it is. So in the case of email, that's fairly simple. You're scanning the email, looking at to, from, subject, sometimes content, sometimes the attachments, and being able to identify what it is to help assist where it is, or even whoever is sending it within the organization. From the case of file systems, there are agents out there that can do the same thing, and same for FTP sites. So it is possible to kind of push a lot of this monitoring out to the periphery of an organization, but you're not creating these types of blocks at the very beginning. You're allowing these business processes to continue to go, but at the same time, potentially aggregating this information, like what Thomas said, through the ability to automate the addition of metadata that can go into some type of repository, whether or not that repository is centralized or not. Now, so another thing that I really like is increasingly we're seeing, we love three-letter acronyms. It was enterprise content management. Now it's in some cases it's enterprise information management. But what it allows us to do is abstract these types of concepts to where some solutions allow you to create a layer on top of your repositories. So probably the most practical thing is, rather than migrate, certainly consolidation of repositories is good. That lowers your technology burden. But the ability to really do that across an organization is really limited. So putting a layer over it that will collect metadata, collect the locations of all these documents, and then present it in a unified way, through user login and access controls and things like that, control access and control what you can do with it, but it allows this information to stay within its given state. And I think those are two ways that some solution providers are providing a pragmatic, practical approach to being able to deal with this type of multi-headed hydra of document-oriented content.
Thank you for that. That really was a pretty big question to be asking there, so thank you for taking the time to address that so thoroughly. I do have another question in here. And someone's asking, how long does it typically take to get ROI, that return on the investment, after investing in further automation and improving their current capture system?
I'm just going to go and be bold here and say, if you can't get ROI in the first 3 months, then it likely might mean that you're not approaching the project in the right way. And the reason why I say that is, in most cases, even still today, ROI, or the large cost associated with, if it's an existing process that involves documents, isn't just the extra time taken to describe this information, whether it's metadata, whether it's pulling out a specific relevant information that is required for a business process, is just getting to that level and automating that piece of it, so that it not only reduces the time and the costs about manual data entry, but it also improves the overall consistency and quality of the data. And what we see typically still, again, even in a day and age of we're almost we almost have autonomously driving vehicles, and we're talking about hyperloops and things like that. It's still a very manual process. So reduction of those costs is often the biggest contributor to an ROI that is very, very short to measure. Now, there are other complexities if you're talking about data access and things to improve efficiencies. Those things I think are a longer burn, but still you should be looking at an ROI if the project is scoped right and the implementation is right in well under a year.
Good, good. Next question, someone's asking about sample size. How large of a sample size do you need to ensure data quality, and where you start to assess the real accuracy of your system?
Yeah, this is I remember standing up in a seminar with a colleague, and we were talking all about the whole process of ensuring data quality and the different approaches, and it was really head scratcher as far as the biggest thing was how much do you need. Certainly, the best approach is to do 100% coverage of all your production data, but unless you have unless every single piece of data can be matched in another system and verified, and your matching is 100%, that's just not practical. So lacking that, the typical rule of thumb is if you have 1,000 samples, you can typically measure to about a 99% accuracy level. Now there's a margin of error that's involved there. So let's say you need 99.9% accuracy, then you're going to almost have an order of magnitude higher number of samples that you need because you're starting to measure precision at a much higher rate. But if you can get 1,000 normal production samples and get that data and be able to compare it, you are in a very good spot. Now, most of you are already doing some sort of manual data entry right now. You'd have to factor for some sort of error associated with that, but it gives you a really good basis line to start comparing. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you. We're just getting close to the end of the webinar hour and just wanted to touch on a couple other things. Just a reminder again to check out the resources we have available to you. And in addition to the research that Greg discussed, Thomas also mentioned some research. I don't have a link out here. But if you just go to the AIM website at aim.aiim.org/research, or it's also in the navigation at the top to go to the research area. A lot of the research that Thomas had mentioned is all going to be posted in there as well. So there's a wealth of good information and reading and learning that you can do on the AIM website. And then also wanted to mention out to you another resource that AIM has available to you with our training offerings. We offer live instructor-led as well as online self-paced classes. And you can thoroughly immerse yourself with a deep dive course and just dip into a topic with the quick studies that we have. And you can arrange for a trainer to come to your place of business if you like and provide custom perspectives of all of our instructor-led programs. So information on that can be found at aim.org/training, and there is a link to that in the resources for you. And just want to thank everyone. Just a reminder that when the webinar is over with, a brief survey is going to open up on your desktop. Value your feedback, and would appreciate your taking a few moments to complete that survey. Very much want to thank our underwriter, Periscript. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinars. And so, as we are bringing our webinar to a close today, I do want to ask each of our speakers for their closing thought or a key takeaway. And I'm going to start first with Greg Council from Periscript. Your closing thoughts today.
Gosh, I'm not sure I have any more thoughts to offer, but I will try. So in general, I think that there's positive results, or I guess I would say the data is positive in terms of the expansion of these types of technologies across the organization, as well as the encompassing of different types of natively digital documents into the fray, so that organizations can benefit not only from cost efficiencies but also process improvement and things like that. But because of the way that these solutions have grown within organizations and actually grown in terms of maturity, it has its own complexities. So my thoughts here are every one of these problems is solvable with the right upfront analysis and approach. And I know that there are people on this call that have really solved some of these things. So it would be really interesting to just even start and get some more feedback in terms of how they've done that. And you should go on the AIIM site and start a forum for that. But that's just basically my thing is I see the highlights are is we continue to experience challenges, but none of them are unsolvable.
Forum you mentioned, we have that, community.aim.org. I'll keep plugging.
That's right.
Here we go, Greg. Thank you very much. And then Thomas Lamont from AIM, your closing thoughts today.
Yeah, I have to agree with Greg's optimism. If I was to close on one idea, it would be that, of course, document capture implementations are really a team effort. It shouldn't just be the burden of one person or a team of capture leaders, but key stakeholders and especially senior management must be brought into the fold as well for these document capture projects to be successful and become that essential tool to face that next generation of information challenges.
Thank you, Thomas. And I just want to thank everyone for your time and attention today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you with our next webinar. And have a good afternoon.